This week, we reap the expert advice of guest Jill Geesinger, certified professional homeopath specializing in the world of pregnancy, postpartum, and motherhood. She teaches us the top 5 remedies she recommends to have on hand during birth to ensure things progress smoothly and appropriately, and her top 3 remedies for a solid postpartum recovery. We discuss how homeopathics work in general, who can take them, when and how, proper storage, and ways to know that they're working well. Homeopathy is a gentle, supportive, effective, and safe way to support your entire motherhood experience. So let's go ahead and start learning.
Welcome to Healthy as a Mother, the podcast for becoming and being a mother, with your co-hosts, Dr. Leah Gordon and Dr. Morgan McDermott, 2 naturopathic doctors who get it.
Each week, we teach you how to be the healthiest mother you can be, from fertility and preconception to pregnancy and birth prep, through postpartum and throughout motherhood, empowering you with the natural health guidance and education you're not getting elsewhere, so you can confidently navigate the broken system at large.
The real, the raw, the untalked about. And remember, this information is not intended to diagnose, treat, or manage any disease. Always consult with your doctor before making any changes.
Okay, welcome, Jill, to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. And I have been a big fan for years following your account, your Instagram account, which is at Her Homeopathy. So for anybody who also maybe follows you or wants to follow you, I highly suggest it. You give so much great information on your page and your blog. Actually, your blog is amazing. So both of those resources. And then I know you do see one-on-one clients, but I did just want to introduce you to our listeners for anybody who's unfamiliar. So Jill Geesinger is the owner of Her Homeopathy, is a certified homeopath, having undergone a 4-year training in Calgary, Alberta. So you're a Canadian Canuck.
Canadian, yeah.
And when you graduated, you were 7 months pregnant and, dove straight into motherhood using a lot of your training at home and with your kids and with your own experience. And now you have 4 children, correct? Yeah. Awesome. Cool. You'll be my role model. And now you specialize in seeing women specifically, sometimes children as well, but specializing in that whole, preconception, trying to conceive, fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum phase. So, I mean, we're really the same in that, which I love because I love finding people who are passionate about this time period as well. So Leah and I cover that whole span. And we are here to talk about how homeopathy works, that it's safe, and then top remedies for birth and postpartum. And I am just so excited to hear all of the wisdom that you have to share with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love talking about labor and birth and all the good things like that. It just, I think that every mom really does. And then
Yeah.
I feel so blessed to be able to just focus on that for a job. You know what I mean? And just, and not just those areas, but beyond too. A lot of my clients are well beyond even their childbearing years, but it's just, they're still moms and they're still I don't know. I love helping them through the struggle because really usually they come with us with the struggle.
And that's the wonderful thing too about homeopathy is that it can help with that struggle on so many levels, both, physically and mental, emotionally. And yeah, so about that, let's just dive in. For anybody who's really unfamiliar, I feel like our audience is at least partially familiar, but let's just pretend not, and we'll go way back. And how would you explain, or how do you explain homeopathy to people, being a homeopath yourself and having your own way? I know the way that I explain is probably not the way that you do, because even for practitioners like naturopathic doctors, it's hard to explain and it's hard to understand and wrap your mind around. And especially in this world where everybody wants to know, definitive facts and science and have studies and all these things. And it's this kind of feels a little bit more energetic realm or, magical realm in that kind of a way. But once you have had the experience, like I have many times, and I know for sure you have, of seeing the way that it works, I mean, it's undeniable, especially on babies, children, and then animals who don't know what you're doing and what you're giving them. When things work with them, you're like, okay. So yeah, go ahead and explain to us in your own words what homeopathy is and how it works.
Yeah. So honestly, even for somebody who's been I've been a homeopath for 10 years now, and it's still, no one will ever be able to wrap their mind around how it works. Right. And it's still when I'm people ask me all the time, how would you explain homeopathy to someone who has no idea? And it's I really try and just go back way up and then just start super basic. And cause a lot of people, we jump right into what it is and how it works and how the remedies are made. And it's like a lot of people don't need to know that, right? So like I often start out like it's a 200-year-old medicine that uses homeopathic remedies to overcome problems. And it's
Perfect.
like that's usually where I start, because for a lot of people they're like, "Oh, okay, that's great." And it's like you don't need to like jump into like the law of similars or like the different laws that we use, because that for a lot of people just goes like right over our head.
Yeah.
Like not our like anyone who they just want a short answer, right? And so that is just like the gist of it. Homeopathy uses homeopathic remedies and helps your body to heal. But like I mentioned the law of similars. So like I'll just like in case anyone's like, what is that? So substances that in nature can cause certain problems, those problems can be taken away by the homeopathic remedy. So, and that's a highly diluted and succussed version of the substance from nature. That's what the homeopathic remedy is. So the law of similars, like people always give like the example of the red onion or allium cepa. And so, because like we can visualize like what it's like to be cutting up a really spicy red onion in the kitchen, and you know that like your eyes run and you might get like a sniffle and your eyes might burn. And so when you experience those feelings when you have a cold or allergies, for example, you take the homeopathically prepared allium cepa or red onion, and then you take the remedy and it's a match in your body, and then it just kind of gives your body that push it needs to overcome those symptoms.
Yeah, I love that. One of the professors in school when we were learning about homeopathy as naturopathic doctors, because it is one of our main modalities, would give the example of those punching bag things that are like in sand. They have like a bottom of sand. It's like a blow up guy, and you can punch him and you fill up the sand on the bottom. Anyway, and that like if it kind of you would punch it and it sort of got stuck off to the side, the homeopathic remedy that's appropriate, like so say he's stuck over in this state or like a particular kind of symptom picture, the homeopathic remedy that will be right for him will give him that a little bit more of a nudge. Because, you know, like if you just tap him a little bit more, then he'll come back to center.
Yes.
And that has always been such a helpful visualization for me in understanding, or something I explain to my patients is, okay, so we all know that we have a biofield, an energetic biofield around us. And you can think about, say when we get sick, we experience a trauma, something scary, an accident, whatever, or maybe we hurt ourselves. That's sort of like a ding in the way that when you get into a car accident to your energetic, your biofield or something. And the right homeopathic remedy will match that ding in a perfect way to pop it back out into like the normal state or expression that you would be in. Would you say that those are correct ways of thinking about it?
Yeah, and I love that because it just emphasizes the fact that it's you that's doing the healing, right? The homeopathic remedy just starts the action or gives you the little nudge that your body needs to do what it knows how to do. And it's just because a lot of people get wrapped in the fact that like these remedies are what's healing them and they need these remedies, but it's like, no, it's actually you. Your body knows what to do. Your body is healing, but the remedies are just helping you a little bit along the way.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's almost just like giving it a little bit more information to start the process when maybe you've been stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And one thing that I also wanted to talk about is the safety profile of a homeopathic remedy. And this is both a good thing and I think a confusing thing to people.
Yes.
So can you start to talk about who are homeopathic remedies safe for, who are they not, and why is it this way?
Yeah. So something that I often say to a lot of people is that homeopathy is safe from your first breath of life until your last. And that means it's so gentle and non-toxic that it can be used by everyone on this planet, animals included, plants included, like literally everything on this earth can use homeopathy. An important topic in homeopathy, which kind of like goes along with the safety aspect, is the process by which a homeopathic remedy goes through to be made. And that's the topic of potentization. So that's the diluting and succussing, which is like you have a bottle or something, and succussing is hitting it against a hard surface. And so that is where like the magic, so to speak, happens, is in the diluting and the succussing of the homeopathic remedy. And so common like potencies are the X potency that you'll see in cell salts, like 6X, or the C potency, like 30C, for example. And so X remedies have been diluted 1 to 10. So a 6X remedy, the active substance is diluted to a 1 to 10 concentration 6 times. And a 30C remedy, so a C remedy, they're diluted 1 to 100. So they're more dilute. So the active ingredient in a 30C was diluted 1 to 100 30 times. So it just like understanding the concept of potentization helps you to kind of become more comfortable to realize how many times, like let's say, for example, the belladonna plant, like how dilute a 30C remedy is, for example. Like it's been diluted 1 to 100, like 1 part crude substance to 100 parts concentration 30 times. And so kind of like the magic number, this is kind of a topic of contention, but is a 12C remedy. And that's based on Avogadro's number. And so at this concentration, supposedly there is no original substance at all left in the remedy. So if somebody is super, super nervous about using homeopathy, I usually say, well, then just use over 12C and you have like, there's no original substance left. And I say it's a topic of contention because like we don't know, like kind of like we talked at the beginning, we don't know exactly how or why homeopathy works and what's going on when the remedies are made. So a lot of people think that there are substances left in, but we just don't know. And you have to be okay not knowing, but know that above a 12C there's nothing left. So I usually recommend 30 or 200C. And even though that's thought to be stronger, the remedy is actually like so much more dilute. So just stick with those numbers.
And then you'll be, in the clear. And that can be really confusing for people because they're like, all right, well, time out. There's none of the actual substance left in this. It's just water, essentially, that's been placed on a little sucrose or lactose pill.
Exactly.
And then the more secretions with that dilution aspect in water, the stronger. And it's like, yeah, exactly. Yes. and I know that sounds crazy, but yep, you nailed it on the head. And it is sort of this mystifying mystery aspect, but we do know to an extent in science. And one thing I think that we can lean on here, and I wish I knew even more about this, is just that water does maintain memory to an extent, and we don't really understand that. We don't really get it. We don't know what exactly is happening there, but it appears that water somehow holds memory. And what is interesting is, because I've been saying this for years, my husband and I have been together for 10 years and we met right in the beginning of my training. Like I was only a couple months into my first year at Bastyr when we met. And anyway, so he's heard me use homeopathy, talk about homeopathy, with him, myself, our kids, our pets, etc. And we were watching Frozen 2 a couple years ago. And I don't know if you've picked up on this with Frozen 2, but they talk about Olaf the whole time talks about how water maintains memory. Water, la 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 la. And he says it a couple of different times throughout that whole movie. And I'm like, you know what? This is kind of weird. First of all, that he I don't know why they picked that theme, but sometimes there's cryptic messages in Disney movies. And maybe in my mind, I'm always like, maybe there's this like actual science behind this that nobody knows about. And this is how homeopathy can be explained because it is fascinating. It's like the energetic imprint of the original substance or the way that substance interacts with our body or something. Like it may not ever be, explainable to a satisfying level to these people who are very left-brained and they want to just no. But one thing that we can say is once they've had an experience, if they have a good homeopath that can help them, there's no turning back. Once you see it, you're like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, what was that moment for you? Do you have any kind of like experience or memory where you were sort of first blown away by homeopathy? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but
yeah. So it's actually kind of funny because when I got into homeopathy, it was a very random decision, like almost like a spirit-led decision that I do that because I had never met with a homeopath before. I had never used a homeopath. Well, I had used Arnica. That is the only homeopathic remedy I had used. And so I when I I moved across provinces to join this, like, to go into this homeopathy program. And when I got there and like classes started, people are like, are you kidding me? Like everyone had this cool story about how homeopathy had changed their life. And I was like, no, I'm just here because it's interesting. Right. Like,
Wow. A leap of faith.
Very much a leap of faith. But like, probably like I saw lots of cool stuff like in clinic through my training. But when it like first, like in my own life was when my son had croup, I think the first time. That was like the first like wow moment, because he went from like so sick and like obviously not being able to breathe to all of a sudden he's fine. Right. And it was just like, that was the first moment in my own life where it was like, holy cow, that is crazy.
Yeah. And it's not that the viral expression of that illness could possibly have resolved so quickly. That's the thing too, I think about with homeopathy is because, and you had mentioned before the call too, that in your training, your 4-year training, which is an extensive training program for homeopathy. I mean, that's awesome that you learn a lot of the clinical sciences, you learn a lot of the anatomy, physiology, everything. Mm-hmm. And as a naturopathic doctor, I did too. And so sometimes when these, kind of almost miracles happen with homeopathy, I'm always thinking to myself, is there any way that this could just have like spontaneously resolved in any other fashion or method? And obviously there's placebo effect is always something, but that's with everything. That's with herbs, that's with pharmaceuticals, that's with anything, except in the realm, I think, of little children that don't understand. And then, of course, pets. Right. And so that's when it's also so exciting and so cool. But some of these things, it's like, croup, to have that really kind of crazy barky cough and the wheeze, the inspiratory wheeze, you give them, I don't know what you gave your son. Was it like Aconitum spongia?
Aconite. Yeah.
Aconite. Yeah. Okay. So, and then you give it to them and then, 25 minutes later, things are sounding totally different, or they've perked up, or they're acting different, or something's happening. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
What is going on?
That's not the normal course of illness.
Yes. And it's so amazing to watch. I can think of multiple things. I think the one that's standing out, this isn't like the most mind-blowing maybe, but it just is coming to mind right now, is with pulsatilla and my son when he was like 18 months old. And he woke up from a nap and he was clearly sick, and he hadn't really been sick before. Maybe he was like starting to trend that way. I don't know, but he was just very weepy, very clingy, had this like yellow snot running down his face and all this stuff. And I was just like, okay. So I gave it to him, kind of experimenting, because again, that's sort of the nice thing about homeopathy is if you, and we'll touch on that in a second, if you get the wrong remedy, it's, it's inert. It's like nothing happened. It's okay. And then he let out this huge sneeze and this like just giant plug of all this really, really gross, creamy, yellowy gunk stuff came out. And then he seemed to just immediately he let me set him down and he started playing happily. And he really had that kind of almost, there's one of these other principles of these ideas is exonerative discharge, which is that sometimes when you give a homeopathic remedy, there'll be some kind of bigger reaction that happens in a short period of time. It could be a sneeze, it could be crying, it could be vomiting. I mean, that would seem a little scary, but it could happen, I guess. What else? How else could an exonerative discharge present itself? Maybe falling asleep. I think I've heard like
falling asleep is a huge one, and that's like such a good sign. Just feeling tired too. That's often something that happens to my clients. Just like feeling like overly tired for a few days and just like the body needing to sleep. Right?
Yeah, doing its thing.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So those moments are very memorable and awesome. And then just back to what I was saying about in terms of the safety. So so there's a couple of truths here. You can use this with a 1-day-old baby. You can use it while you're pregnant, while you're breastfeeding, the whole time. Yeah. Also, if you get the wrong remedy, nothing is going to happen. So it's okay. It's like just, you can kind of keep chugging through them. I mean, there's definitely better ways to find the right homeopathic remedy for your situation. And that whole process can go very, very deep. And when you work with a homeopath, it does. And you're much more likely to get the right remedy when you work with a homeopath because of all of the different ways that they're thinking about and investigating it and using like software that's helping with looking at all the remedies, because how many are there? there's like hundreds of remedies, right?
Oh, there's thousands.
Thousands.
There's
Okay, sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's
yeah,
so many. And
yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah, we know about like the top 20. I feel like if you sort of kind of get going into homeopathics, you'll learn those really common ones, but then just know that
yeah,
there are hundreds and thousands more.
yeah,
Um, but if you get the wrong remedy, nothing is going to happen. Also, if your child like crawls up on the counter and eats the entire bottle, it's okay. Nothing also is going to happen because it's not, because again, remember, there is no molecules left of the original substance. So even if it was something highly toxic and poisonous, like belladonna, for instance,
Mhm.
there will be no belladonna molecules originally from the plant left in the homeopathic preparation. I mean, I guess unless it was prepared incorrectly, but there's pretty good, safety and regulations on the way that they do it within the companies because they're not FDA regulated, but
Yeah,
within the
and
companies themselves, like Boiron and Highlands, like they try.
yeah, within here too. Just to briefly cut in there, there is not as strict of safety regulations in India, and so there's a lot of Indian remedies like on Amazon and things that like pop up when you search on Google. And so I just always recommend to people that like it's either coming like out of the UK or out of the US or out of Canada.
Oh, that's really good to know. And India is a huge or is a country that uses a lot of homeopathy. I mean, there's
Yeah.
the Banerjee protocols, like there's
Yes.
whole hospitals that use just homeopathy. They're called like Banerjee hospitals, aren't they? What are they called?
Yeah, yeah, they have those. I actually studied there in my 4th year of my training. We went there
That is
for
so cool.
forget if it was 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and it was amazing. And most of them are fine, but there's just they don't have the same strict rules that we have.
Yes.
So like if you're ordering a remedy from there, there's just really no way to know. Like even one of my teachers, she used to train there, and she trained in a Banjari clinic, and they warned her, no, you don't buy homeopathic remedies from other places here. Only get them from our clinic. Just because
Oh,
you don't know, right? You don't
yeah.
know. Yeah.
And we're often working with really highly toxic things in their original substance. Like arsenicum album is arsenic,
Yes.
or, leadum is lead, or mercurius is mercury, like really toxic heavy metals and different
Yeah, and
things.
like all the common like ones that people know about, like the aconite, the belladonna, the arnica, those are all toxic plants.
Yeah, right.
And so like you want them to be made properly.
Yes. Okay, that's really interesting. Oh, that's so cool that you studied it in India. I bet that was amazing.
It was so amazing. But I found out I was pregnant when I was there.
Oh,
So then,
jeez.
there's a lot of smells and things in
Oh,
India.
mhm.
So that was pretty difficult, just being sick. But other than that, it was amazing.
Maybe you could use some homeopathy for your nausea.
Yeah, it was a good thing I was studying in a clinic. But then also like I was like being like all secretive about it. I was like, I want to like tell my husband first, and I don't want to like, but so
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, totally. That reminds me that we have a post, and I'll put that in the show notes. That we did a little collab post on morning sickness
Yes.
remedies and some kind of naturopathic things to think about that also contribute to the nausea cycle, which is just such a mean cycle in early pregnancy because sometimes people are experiencing quite a significant portion of their nausea because they're hypoglycemic,
Mhm.
and it's because they're not eating because they're very nauseous, or maybe because they're vomiting,
Right.
and then they become more hypoglycemic, and then they're even less appealing to food because they're more nauseous, et cetera, et cetera. And then also with like electrolytes and hydration in general. But then you outlined several remedies that were really interesting, and some of them that are very rare and not talked about, or maybe
Yeah.
used for other things. They're kind of like the heavy hitters of the nausea world when you get really deep into homeopathy. So definitely check out that post if you guys are in that phase of life where you're feeling the morning sickness.
Yeah.
I'll put that in the show notes here below. Um, okay, I wanted to say that about essential oils. So there is a few things about homeopathic remedies in terms of your storage. They are sensitive to a few things, not a ton, and you don't need to be super hyper about it. Like if your bottle of homeopathic whatever touches an essential oil bottle, it's not like the whole thing is inert, but we don't want
Mhm.
to store homeopathic remedies in the same cabinet that we're storing essential oils.
Right.
And we also would prefer to not put them like near the Wi-Fi router
Yes, exactly.
because they can become, rendered less effective. They are sensitive in this way. What else would you say we need to be
Yeah.
mindful of?
So like don't store them, yeah, beside your Wi-Fi router. Don't store them beside your microwave if you have one. Don't just try and keep them in an area in your house where there's like not strong scents, like I have mine in my closet in my room. um, and it's not a for sure that these things can antidote them. It's just a possibility. And so we just want to just be careful, because like you could have like a really expensive stash of homeopathic remedies. And what if you're leaving them beside these substances and then all of a sudden the action is nullified? Right.
Yes.
And another thing is they're sensitive to very high heat, and they're sensitive to very, very cold. And so don't leave them in your camper during the winter, or don't leave them in your car on like a super, super hot day for days at a time. I had a client recently who she left her remedy. It was a hot summer day. I don't know the conversion to Fahrenheit, so I won't say the temperature.
Okay. That's okay.
But it was a really hot day for us. And she left her homeopathic remedy in the car for an hour, and she was like, is it not going to work anymore? I was like, I doubt that's the case. Like I would for sure still use it. And you don't have to be that careful. I think they're a lot more powerful and a lot more resilient than we give them credit for, but there's just no way to know. Right. And these are just rules that we've learned over the years. And so it's pretty easy to just stick to them, so that I do.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that would also kind of apply to maybe not a tincture as much, but encapsulated herbs or some kind of pharmaceuticals too. Like there's certain things we need to be a little bit careful about, because biologically active substances can be affected by, like temperature or moisture, etc. So it's not like we need to be super babying the remedies, but just, some things to have on hand in your mind. So, okay, let's go ahead and talk about sort of the meat of this episode, which I'm really excited about, which it would be if you had to pick, and you said that it was hard to narrow down. So I love that. That's always how I am. But you were able to keep it to 5 homeopathic remedies to keep on hand for birth, and then 3, although there is kind of one overlap, but that's okay, for postpartum. So, the women that are listening to this are generally in this sort of healthy, alternative, crunchy, whatever you want to call it, world. And so I think that they will really appreciate this. And this can be something that is part of your birth bag. And maybe you even, depending on how if this resonates with you as a listener, that you write out a little instruction sheet to your birth team, because when you're in labor, you're probably not going to be the one to be able to make these choices of which remedy would be the most appropriate one. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but it would be nice for your birth team, your partner, your doula, etc., to say, hey, in the case of this happening, I have this remedy, this happening, I have this remedy. I did do that with my first labor. I don't think anybody, actually, no, at one point my midwife was totally giving me different remedies, like in a little cup, and I was just slamming them back. I don't even know what they were, but yeah, this is a way to be prepped though, and just have, or maybe if you as the listener are ever at a birth attending and helping some other people, how you can help things along or mitigate different issues. So let's go ahead and hear it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you as the laboring woman don't want to be having to think about what remedy what presentation you're giving at that time, right? That's not where your mind should be.
Yeah.
And if you don't tell the people about the remedies, or I even recommend like going over them like with your support person or your husband or whatever beforehand, so that it's like, it's not just like all new when you go into labor, and just kind of give you that peace of mind that that's ready to go and that's taken care of. So the number one remedy for labor and birth and postpartum, no surprise, is Arnica. And a lot of people know about Arnica, which is amazing that it's gotten so popular. But I always recommend women to take a dose at the beginning of labor. And this can help prevent postpartum complications like hemorrhage, and to get a jump start on like after pains and the need for pain medications. You can also take another dose if birth is moving along like super fast, and hemorrhage is a concern. You can take it if birth is slow and contractions become weak and unaffected. Then you can take doses to kind of move things along in that way. And then I also recommend it, like I said, for postpartum. Recommend taking Arnica 3 times a day for 3 days in a row. And that does a really good job of just encouraging like healing of all your tissues, help control your bleeding, reduce bruising, swelling. It also, like a common thing with Arnica is a feeling like you're like battered and bruised, or like you've been hit by a car, like many women can feel after the marathon of birth. Yeah. And so it helps with that. It can help with like shock for anyone involved in the birth, like if things didn't go as planned or there was a traumatic experience. helps with just like general after pains and pains in general. It can also be given to your baby too, if like, again, it was like a really fast birth, or if you're in the hospital and it like there was a forceps delivery, or just in general, if there's like bruising, swelling, stuck shoulder, even.
Yeah, shoulder dystocia,
Yeah.
vacuum,
Yeah.
face presentation, any kind of like thing that might be happening where your baby is bruised, or, unfortunately there are experience times and places where they have to maybe break like the collarbone to get the baby out, or
Yes.
different situations like that. That's an extenuating circumstance, but those would all be great for arnica. What potency do you like for that?
So, I meant to say this at the beginning. So for all labor, I recommend 200C.
200C. Oh, all of these remedies 200C. That's good to know. Cool. Why is that?
Yeah, and just because labor is like intense and usually full of emotion, and that's a great fit just in general for the 200C potency.
Okay.
So
More.
if you only have 30C, then use 30C. But 200 just in general is a better fit.
And what do we think about 1M? I feel like that
One,
one is told for arnica sometimes with birth.
it can be. I usually like if things like were really traumatic, really intense, there's lots of bleeding, you could have that on hand.
Okay.
I oft like usually 200C is the ticket in general
Okay.
in labor and birth. So yeah, when I'm like usually like for your listeners, like that's a no like classified as a strong homeopathic remedy that usually like practitioners use. And so I don't usually recommend people keeping that at home. But arnica is an exception because like there can be really bad accidents, there can be complications, and so it might be one you want to have.
Yeah, for kind of like a catastrophic event
Yeah.
situation, but other things. And also just for anybody who's like first learning about homeopathy in this episode, or maybe they're getting a couple of dustings, they've heard it a few times, and you maybe haven't had a baby yet, or you're pregnant with your first, arnica is going to be your best friend in raising children.
Yes.
Because of how just variable it is for bumps and bruises. They fall off their scooter, they hit the back of their head, they hurt their arm, they twist something, they fall down, they just, anything. Like my daughter last week or a couple weeks ago slammed her chin on wet concrete and split it open, had to have stitches.
Oh man.
And the first thing that I did basically when I, except for looking at it and trying to hold a tissue to stop the bleeding, was give her arnica. So it's really awesome. Your kids will begin to learn that they can get arnica, and they'll be like, I need arnica. They'll start to ask for it. And like little toddlers being like, arnica, it's so cute.
I know. The other night, my husband, he had like, he was doing some heavy lifting at work and just like overexerted something. And he was like, "Oh, what remedy do I need?" My son was like, probably arnica, take a dose now and then we'll wait and see. And I'm like,
and you're like, yes, they're listening. They're totally listening.
Yeah, they
It's
are.
awesome. Oh, I love
It is
that.
awesome. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
very
but
sweet.
even like with the arnica, like 1M, just to give like an example of like a situation when that would be used. I was helping a friend with her daughter through a head injury in so that was this spring, I think. And like it was a bad quadding accident and she got a head
Ooh.
injury and she was in the hospital, and the doctors couldn't believe how she was healing. They didn't know that the mom was giving her arnica, but just like the speed at which she recovered and then was able to be sent home was like remarkable, and had never like the doctor couldn't believe it. And so like that, like arnica 1M, like so like in your labor, if it's like as traumatic as like a brain injury, like
Yes,
then like
something really kind of crazy going on. Or
yeah.
maybe too, for the people who do that kind of double birth thing where like they labor to have a vaginal birth forever and ever and ever, and almost, maybe get to 10 centimeters and then end up having to have a cesarean.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So they've sort of done both,
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
aspects.
Yes,
That could be really
exactly.
helpful. Yeah. You're just reminding me that one thing I've noticed about arnica, if I take it myself, which I feel like this is a typical mom thing, maybe not, but hopefully somebody out there is like, solidarity to you, that I don't tend to take things for myself, but I'll give them to my kids,
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I am the last person who ever gets like a homeopathic remedy, and it's like,
I know.
but
I
then
even
our
laugh.
bodies are screaming for it, and we're like, oh, just ignore, you know?
I know, but then yet with the kids, I'm like, oh, here, come, let me give you something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the couple of times recently, in maybe the last like 18 months that I can think of, that I have given myself arnica for something where I got hit really hard or fell or whatever. What I know, I very much have noticed this. I will not get a physical bruise. You will not see a discoloration on my skin. And I mean, that's one of the indications, right? Is for like that bruising picture. But it is so wild to me because some of these, I'm not somebody who necessarily bruises easily. I feel like I'm very normal. But some
Uh-huh.
of these things that have happened have been like, a baseball to like my thigh. And I should definitely have a bruise
Yes.
to that for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I won't get one. And maybe it'll be a little tender, but I'm just shocked at the recovery rate of these sorts of injuries. It's
I
amazing.
know. It's crazy. Yeah. My family, we mountain bike a lot. And the falls that my kids have taken, like especially my 8-year-old, he's insane. And so like when you give arnica and then the next day it's like, are you kidding me? Like, nah, like there's no visible sign of what happened. Like, did I just
Yes.
like make a big deal out of nothing? No, I have a video actually. I know how bad that fall was.
Yeah. Yeah. You should
Yeah.
be limping. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
funny.
That's great. Yeah. Arnica is a huge one, I think, for all of motherhood. So you're getting a good takeaway here that stock up on the Arnica. As we are talking about birth and postpartum support, I want to talk about my favorite reproductive health nutritional supplement company, Needed. Pregnancy and postpartum are the most nutritionally demanding times in a woman's life, and although many women know to take a prenatal during their pregnancy, they often forget to continue taking it during their postpartum period. As naturopathic doctors, we typically recommend continuing your prenatal for at least the 9 months after your baby is born, or if you are continuing to nurse, then you take it throughout your entire breastfeeding journey. The prenatal multi by Needed is the most robust of its kind on the market, as it contains the appropriate dosages of each nutrient that are well and above the bare minimums that most prenatals contain. They use transparent, rigorous third-party testing to show quality, and now there are over 4,000 top practitioners recommending their products. Postpartum supports can come in many forms, and the Needed prenatal is certainly one of them to add to your regimen. Head to thisisneeded.com and use code HEALTHYMOTHER for 20% off your first order. And yes, healthy mother, like a little mantra or affirmation for yourself. Okay, cool. Now back to the show. Let's go on to number 2. What is your second recommendation?
Okay, so the next two remedies are Caulophyllum and Gelsemium.
Okay, and
And
for anybody who's listening and wondering, I'm going to write all of these remedy names in the show notes because they're hard to spell, they're hard to hear. Like, what are you saying? So don't worry, I'm going to go in order as well. So now we're talking about Caulophyllum and then Gelsemium. Okay.
and so these remedies are both super great for like the slow labor or the not progressing labor. And I think that I actually like subconsciously came up with these remedies because they're all remedies that I needed like in one of my births along the way.
Cool.
But these are just like, that's just like a problem that like can send a lot of women like for C-sections or like change a birth plan if the labor is just not progressing. So that's why I thought these two were super important, and they're actually very similar in their presentations. And so if one doesn't work, I usually recommend to try the other one.
Oh,
And so I'll just kind of like give like a brief explanation of like both of the remedies. And so if you need gelsemium, your labor is going to be like like super slow. Hours go by and you're not dilating. Mom will be feeling like weak, drowsy, exhausted, and just kind of like spacey and checked out. She might like feel like almost like stage fright type thing, like she's like nervous of giving birth, like around all of these people, and like a lot of like what if thoughts, and just wants to be alone, and that might not help her progress, but she just like feels better emotionally if she's left alone. And then Caulophyllum, similar, like labor is super slow and sluggish. Labor pains won't be very strong and might feel like more like spasms. If she is feeling the contractions, they'll be like sharp and like moving around the abdomen. There might be needle-like pains like shooting up into your cervix. Labor may have stopped completely because she's so tired. And there's a lot of restlessness and nervousness, but often they want to be around people. So that's kind of like differentiation between Gelsemium and Caulophyllum. Is Caulophyllum wants people around, Gelsemium just wants to be alone.
Okay. That's
And they
awesome.
are, yeah, they're just, they can really help a labor. Like they won't like throw you into crazy labor, but they will just help your body regain energy and kind of get a second wind and continue on the path to have your baby.
And how often do you think that people should be dosing these?
It totally depends. Like that's one of the hiccup, like not a hiccup, but like problems that people have with homeopathy, because it's not like take this every 2 hours. It's just like dependent on your situation. So if you have been in labor for like 30 hours and you're completely exhausted and you can't continue, and your labor team is like, we like, if you're at home, for example, we got to go to the hospital, then like I would be like whichever fit better, the Gelsemium or the Caulophyllum. So make sure your birth team knows these remedies. Like I would probably be like taking it every 15 minutes, like until like there's like an obvious like shift in energy, until you feel like, okay, I can get up and I can keep going with this, or
Okay.
I can keep laying here and keep going too. But just there's an obvious like desire and will back in the body to continue like with this birth and having this baby. And you just like, a second wind is just a good example. Like and then once you feel that feeling, then you can hold off until that feeling might start coming back again. And then you could again start taking it every 15 to 20 minutes until you feel good.
Okay, so let's just pretend that we're doulaing or something for some other person, and the woman has this. We give her Caulophyllum or Gelsemium or both, because we're not really sure. Every 15 minutes for like 3 doses, and then there's like a marked difference in her presentations. She starts to perk up, or the contractions get stronger and closer together again, and they're like, whoa, okay, something has shifted. So now we're going to wait, and we're just going to chug along with that, and the effect should last, a good long time. Sometimes it could be for the rest of the labor. Maybe it'll just be for a couple of hours. If we start to notice this pattern redevelop of the sluggishness, etc., then we can begin to do the dosing again.
Yeah, that's correct.
Otherwise, we should just wait and watch, because that is the thing about homeopathy. And I know that this differs between homeopaths too, and different philosophies, is sometimes people are like a one dose. You give one dose one time and that's it.
Right.
And then some people are, a couple of doses a day. And some people are every 15 minutes till you see the effect, then you stop. So kind of back to what we were saying. First of all, it's an art. Second of all, there's not really a wrong way to do it. You're just going to have to kind of play around and be a bit intuitive with it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I like that. I think that makes sense though. See an effect and then just hold off and wait. And you might want to, or you might feel inclined to want to like keep giving it because it's working, but just let it do its thing.
Yeah, just like the beginning, like your beginning example of like the punching bag guy. He's over here, right? And so you give enough doses of the Gelsemium or the Caulophyllum until like he's moving back up, right? And then he's got it. He's got it.
Yeah, you don't need to give any more, because those punches aren't going to do anything until maybe he falls back over and you need to give him another punch again.
Yeah.
Okay, great. What about remedy number 4?
So remedy, this one I'll just a brief one that I remembered and slipped in, is Aconite. And that is just like for when you're in labor and you all of a sudden feel like really suddenly very panicky, and like panic attack type feelings, or like all of a sudden like you got to get out of here because like you want to run away from this birth, and just feelings of fear, maybe feelings like you're going to die in labor. And just like usually they come very suddenly and out of nowhere. And so that's just a remedy I like to have on hand just in case, because usually there are no feelings of that before labor, and it just is very sudden.
And can Aconite too be used for like when a labor comes on very fast and quick?
Yes. Yeah. Fast labors. Yep. Definitely. That
fast labors, they're very overwhelming. Maybe there's even like shaking. I'm remembering reading about this.
Yeah. Just like the feeling of being in shock, really.
Yeah. Like what is happening? Like, oh my gosh, this is happening right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In reflecting back on Dr. Leah's, so my podcast co-host here, her birth, and we both thought about this later, the way that her labor eventually started. She went full on to 42 weeks, had a couple of membrane strips. We were sort of up against the last 2 days, the last 48 hours of being able to have a home birth. Otherwise, she was going to go for hospital induction as per California law. Does Canada have the 42-week law?
I actually don't know.
Oh, cool. I'm gonna have to look into that because
Yeah.
it's such a.
I don't think we have a law around it. I feel like if you're with an OB, like I was never with an OB, so I don't know their rules, but I feel like that's just like the standard. But I don't think we have a law around it.
Okay, your midwife was never like, you can't go past 42 weeks.
No.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, then you probably don't have it. I'll have to look into it. Anyways, we were bumping up against that where she was going to have to transfer and was going to be no longer legally able to birth with the midwives at home.
I see.
And we were at dinner. We were not at dinner. We were just sitting down for dinner. And she like had this feeling and she was like, oh my gosh, I think this is like the first real contraction. She had a lot of cramping, but it wasn't that sort of wave pattern. And then, not even 4 minutes go by and she's like, oh, here it is again. And then it was like 3 minutes go by, boom, there it is again. 3 minutes go by, boom, there it is again. And like she like stood up and they were intense. They were not gentle kind of contractions. They were like, whoa, she was very shocked. I mean, I would say the word shock and started to kind of shake. And it was happening really quickly, totally out of nowhere. And she was definitely, I mean, we were all surprised by it. And it was sort of like, whoa, what is going on? And in retrospect, I don't know why neither of us thought about it, but totally, I think Aconitum would have been the appropriate remedy for that moment because she needed to be kind of calmed down and regrounded, rerooted. And that's something that the remedy would be able to offer is getting you back to just this sort of baseline and sloughing off any of these fears.
Yeah. Well, even
live and learn.
I know. Well, even like, it's just when you're so invested in it, it's hard to see, right? So that's why it's good to have someone like even on your birthday who is just like solely there to help with the homeopathic remedies because that's what they're thinking about, right? Like with my third birth, that I needed Aconite, but I didn't get it because I was like so in it, and I don't know, nobody else gave it to me because it was so obviously what I needed. It just came on so fast, and the labor and birth was so fast, and I just wanted to get out of there. Like I wanted to run away.
Yeah, because it's so intense. That's how my second labor was. I was just blown away by the sensations I was feeling. It was shocking.
Yeah.
This is reminding me of Dr. Ilana Rumel, who runs the Med School for Moms program.
Oh yeah.
She's a good friend. And I'm going to try to find her birth story and I'll link it in the show notes because her first birth story, so she's a homeopathic specialist as well. And for her first labor, home birth, she had somebody there specifically to prescribe homeopathy. And there were multiple points throughout the labor where homeopathic remedies were the absolute game changer to the way that it all went because it was very long. At one point her cervix became swollen and they were holding ice on it for a little while, but then they ended up putting pulsatilla directly on her cervix, pellets of pulsatilla. And boom, the swelling went all the way down. And because it was getting to that point of, well, if your cervix becomes actually truly too swollen, it's a C-section. You cannot, dilate anymore. So anyway, I'm going to try to find that and link it because it's a fascinating story and you would enjoy it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What about number 5?
Okay. And number 5 is just one more, Caulophyllum, just in case of back labor, because that's another one that really throws women through the loops. And so actually in my practice, I use the Banjuri protocol for like a general healthy pregnancy. And part of that's using pulsatilla for a few weeks at the end of pregnancy for various reasons. But one is to get the baby and your body in proper alignment. So often like if we're doing that, back labor isn't a thing, but just in case, Caulophyllum is the number one remedy for if your baby is not in the right position and you're feeling those contractions in your back. And like it can if your baby is not in the right position, there is a possibility that it can flip them and like to go to the right position, but it just helps to get that pain out of your back and to just have your body just be working as it should.
And that pain is the worst. I had back labor with my first birth and then not with my second or third. Did you ever have it with yours?
I did not have back labor because of Caulophyllum. So
Nice. Good for you.
My second baby, I birthed her she was sunny side up. Which,
Stop. And you didn't feel the
and
back
I didn't
labor?
feel a thing. I didn't feel any back labor at all. And so like, I don't know. I think she flipped like just before labor, and I don't know why or how, because I had used pulsatilla at some point and she had been the right way. I think I had a midwife appointment the day before and all things were looking great. And then it was such a surprise that this baby came out sunny side up, because we had no idea. Like I felt like inklings of like in my back at the beginning, I guess. And then I took Kelly carb because I was still like,
Wow.
I wasn't like in full birth mode, where like you're before and you can still like think. And
Think about it.
so
Yeah.
I took a dose and that was it. And then she came out sunny side up. So it was hard to get her out because she was in that presentation, but I didn't feel it.
Wow. Well, that's great, because the mean thing about back labor too for most women is that when you're feeling it, you don't really ever get that full break between contractions, because you're still feeling this aching in your back. That's pretty intense. So you're sort of just like constantly in pain, and that can be really exhausting. It's just like a whole different level of like it drags on and on and on and
Yeah.
on. But, oh, that's fascinating to know. Okay. I wish I would have had that in my first birth, because the whole thing was back labor. Although he did not come out sunny side up. He came out oblique. He was not in any of the positions that he should have been. He came out and he had his hand on his face. And I mean, it was like, whatever.
Wow.
It was what it was. He came out though.
It was such a surprise. And the pictures of her coming out like are so cool. It is like, I love them so much. And I actually just remembered, can I just mention like two more really quick? They're just
Yes.
they're just cell salts.
Yes, let's do it.
Magphos and Caliphos.
Okay.
And they're just so easy to just throw in like your water bottle or your labor aid or whatever you're drinking. And they help like with pain, cramping, exhaustion. They help with nerves, anything like that. And homeopathy books, like super old homeopathy books, even claim that Caliphos has the potential to shorten your labor times. So
cool.
It's always ones that I made sure that my husband, as soon as I went into labor, they were in my water bottles. Even if you have them in your water, like just put them in, start putting them in your water bottle now.
Yeah, prenatally. And is that always 6X for
6X,
the potency?
yeah.
Okay. And then how many of the little tablets would you say to put into like a 30-ounce water thing?
I just usually put 2 or 3 of each one.
Oh, really? Only a couple? Okay. Of each. Okay. Sort of. And to backtrack, for a regular homeopathic remedy, it's like typically is 3 to 5 pellets. Yeah. And again, you could take the entire bottle and it's not going to make it stronger for you. It would just be a waste of money.
No, exactly. Because it's just every time you take a remedy, it doesn't really matter how many pellets you take. It's just every individual. I'm
like
blanking.
pulse.
Yeah. So every time you take a remedy, that's your dose, right? And that's your I'm blanking on what I'm trying to say. But so it doesn't matter if you take the whole bottle or one pellet, it's the same.
Yeah, it's the same net effect.
Yes.
And that is also really hard for people to understand. For some reason, it does just make sense to me in my mind. I don't really know why, but I see things a lot very visually. And that one, all of the principles of homeopathy, I know that they don't really make sense in a traditional science way, but it makes sense to me that one pellet or the whole bottle could be the same. And it's more about the frequency and that pulsing of the dosing rather than the amount. Yeah. Okay, cool. Good. I'm glad we're on the same page here about that. Now let's talk about those 3 postpartum remedies.
Yeah. Okay. So then the 4th that overlaps was the Arnica that I already mentioned.
Right. Okay.
But then 3 that I find really important to have on hand for postpartum are belladonna, bryonia, and phytolacca. And they really they do good for other things too, but just like really focusing on breasts. They're amazing for breast engorgement and also for mastitis. So yeah, I've experienced both of those. And so I think that's why top of mind, they were just like, those are remedies that I would recommend every woman having on hand for postpartum. And so belladonna, will have red, hot, swollen breasts when they're engorged. Bryonia, there's engorgement with the breasts are still the same color, they're your normal skin color, but they feel so much worse for moving around. Any movement at all, even rolling over in bed is awful. And then phytolacca, it's good for just hard, lumpy, engorged breasts. And then the mastitis presentation is very similar, but then also the general sick feeling, fever stuff will go along with that.
Okay. And for those, would you do 30C or 200?
Either one, whatever you have. 30 or 200.
Okay. And so say because this will be a little bit different than in the birth way, but so say, somebody's 6 days postpartum and their engorgement is starting to become more like of a mastitis, maybe there's a bad latch or something like that. How often would you want the dosing for one of these types of remedies?
Yeah, usually. So again, people hate this answer, but it depends on it depends on the presentation. So usually like a belladonna picture of engorgement and or mastitis is very intense. So usually belladonna is a remedy you're going to give more frequently. So like again, like in labor, you could give it like a few times an hour and then evaluate, how am I doing? Like evaluate after each dose, but then like typically I say in acute situation, give the remedy 3 times and then evaluate.
Okay.
So it just depends. So yeah, if your experience is not that bad, then you could just be giving the remedy like 3 or 4 times a day.
Okay. A little bit less often. Yeah. Until you feel relief and, are getting better, and then you can stop. Okay. Awesome. I love this. Thank you so much, Jill. I think that this episode is going to be really helpful for people as a tool in preparing for birth and postpartum specifically, but then also just understanding homeopathy deeper. And I think it's one of those topics that just takes a lot of layers of exposure to fully grasp, and then to also then push somebody into wanting to seek it out themselves and want to study it themselves. I think having kids is usually that for women, because it is so safe and we can give it to newborns. There's not that many things that we can give to newborns, or under 6 months, for fevers specifically. Like under 6 months, at least in the US, we say no ibuprofen, only Tylenol, which is acetaminophen. And acetaminophen's not awesome. It's okay, but it's not the best. And I mean, not that ibuprofen is an super angelic medicine, but it's better.
Yeah.
And, so as much as we can be empowered to learn about ways to relieve the discomfort of our children, or if the fever is becoming too high, or there's pain, or there's sickness of any kind, it's something that really propels people into this field, I think, is wanting to know how to use it on their families and help them in more of like a holistic way without the side effects of this pharmaceutical world. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Healthy as a Mother podcast. In order for others to hear this information, please leave a review with Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and send to a friend who could benefit from this content. We're so excited to share more on becoming and being a mother next time.
And please remember that the ideas and views of this podcast are for informational purposes only and are not intended to serve as a substitute for medical care of any kind, including the diagnosis or treatment of any illness or disease. Consult with your provider before integrating this information into your own care plan. And remember, a healthier future starts now, and it starts with you.